thanking our sponsors. We could not host this amazing week without them. Our presenting sponsor is Muskogee Creek Nation Casino. Host sponsor is the Indian Capital Technology Center, and our speaker sponsor is OG&E. Other sponsors include First Star Bank, Green Country Behavioral Health Services, St. Francis Hospital Muskogee, Armstrong Bank, Arvis Bank, Georgia Pacific, Muskogee Phoenix, Northeastern State University, Refresco, Connor State College, and Lead Bottling. Today's speaker sponsor is OG&E. With that being said, I'm excited to welcome our first Women's Leadership Conference speaker for the week, Nicole Hopkins with MidFirst Private Bank. Nicole is a private bank officer at MidFirst Bank. She specializes in providing depository and financing solutions, including but not limited to jumbo construction to perm and other residential mortgages, unsecured and secured lines of credit, business loans, investment property portfolio financing, aircraft, and commercial lending. Nicole is a former director of business development across various industries and owner of Blossom Box, a corporate gifting company focusing on internal employee and external client gifting strategies. She enjoys being part of the community, spending time with family, and anything related to the arts.
Awesome. Well, we are going to get started, but it'll take me just a second to share my screen. So if you'll bear with me for a moment. Let me see. Okay. Okay, can everyone see my screen okay? I'm going to pull up the chat too. Okay. Can you all, Muskogee Chamber, can you guys hear me okay? Okay, great. Let me make sure. Okay, my screen is working. Awesome. Well, it's nice to meet all of you. I just got very nervous because I scrolled through the panelists and I realized, wow, there are so many amazing women. Some of you that I know, some of you that I don't. Today, I'm going to be sharing one of my favorite presentations. It's really just my story from business owner to banker. A little bit of my background that might be important to this is when I was in college, I actually studied international community development. And for my first few years out of school, I was determined to work at a nonprofit. I must have applied for at least 50 positions. And the door just never opened for me. I'm the type of person who will bang on a door and knock that door down if I want in and it's something I care about. But after a couple of years of doing that, I decided to lean into that I must have had some purpose in the business and corporate world, because on that side of things, the doors seemed to always fly open. Whether it was a job or a client or being able to use my career to build bridges to the nonprofit world, it seemed like that was where I was supposed to be. And a lot changed for me in my journey when I accepted that and when I got excited about what that would look like. So I know they shared a little bit of my background. I work full-time at MidFirst. MidFirst is the largest privately held bank in the US. It's about $36.5 billion in assets. And the reason I share that is because MidFirst is a lot bigger than me. And they were willing to take a chance on me. I didn't have a banking background when I came there. I've had a kind of unique career journey. Part of why they brought me on the team was because of relationship development. And that's been a theme throughout my career that we'll talk a little bit about. The most important thing for you all to know, though, everything that I share comes from a lens of how it affects my niece. So I'm very involved in her life. We spend a lot of time together. Her name is Aaliyah. She has been to board meetings with me. She has taken naps under my desk when she worked at the office with me for a day just because she thought it was fun. She's been a big part of my career journey. And part of why this has been so important to me is because I am from a blue collar family. I was a first generation college grad, and I had never seen a woman in a suit until I was in high school. When I was in high school, I was part of DECA, which is a business group. You may have students who are in it, you may have been in it in the past. But for me, that was so significant because we can't really believe in the things that we don't see. And that was one of the first times in my life that I remember thinking, maybe I could be in a suit one day. So I'm passionate about financial literacy for women. And that's part of why I take my niece along. She has become a master negotiator, which doesn't always work in my benefit when we're negotiating to take a picture at a basketball game. But I'm proud of her. I love her a lot. So a little bit of my career background. Part of what they asked me to share about was my career journey, just because it has been unique. So out of college, I started off as an executive assistant at a speakers bureau. I was booking TED Talk speakers, reality TV stars, whoever an organization might pay for to speak at their event. And from there, I transitioned into business development with a local law firm. I learned a lot about building relationships and the law. But then I transitioned industries again after that. I transitioned to an architecture firm. So I was still doing business development, but a new industry. And that's part of why I look at my career journey as a winding stairwell. I feel like most of the pictures we see in life is this upward trajectory, right? And sometimes it goes down a little bit and then up. But for me, it's been like, we're running in one direction and then we stop and we move to a new industry. And what I see now in this position is that all those things tied together. The biggest quote that's driven my career is by Andy Stanley, and it's do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. And that is the biggest thing I learned throughout business development. In the beginning, I used to beat myself up, whether it was in my business or my career in general, because I couldn't remember every client's birthday. And I didn't send a thank you card after every single meeting I had with someone. And I learned that the best I can do is to do for one what I wish I can do for everyone. And so what that's looked like for me is I wake up every day knowing I can't reach out to every single person on my client list today, but I can reach out to one and I can be present with them and I can let them know I care about them and how they're doing. And that is really what drove me to start my gift company, Blossom Box. So I started Blossom Box about 4 years ago. And for years, I had wanted to start a business, but nothing never felt right. I had a million nonprofit ideas, but I couldn't think of something that left the world better than I found it, but was also profitable for me and my family. So one day I was sitting at the Whole Foods at 91st and Yale in Tulsa, and I was just journaling, thinking about things that had impacted me in the past, businesses I wish existed. And I had a thought of a gift company that was designed for sales professionals. So in one of my business development roles, part of that job was buying thank you gifts when community members would refer us new clients. And I remember getting the biggest client I had ever been sent before and being so excited. The individual who sent it to me was a CPA, and I called that CPA's executive assistant, and I was so excited. And I was thinking, maybe I can give her tickets to a Bedlam game. I knew she was a big OSU fan. And when her executive assistant answered, the first thing she said was, "I'm so sorry. I don't think she'll be able to attend right now. She just started chemo." And so I just stopped in my car that day and I ended up spending 4 hours visiting local boutiques. I have a younger sister who had been in the hospital on the oncology floor for a while. So I knew it would be difficult to find a gift. I knew that scents would be tough. I knew that the texture of the blanket would matter. And I spent most of that day trying to find the perfect gift, not just to thank her, but to meet her where she's at with something that would be helpful. So I got back to the office that day and I had an amazing manager who said, "I love your heart. but we might not want to spend half the day shopping for gifts. And she was absolutely right. So that's what started Blossom Box. I was leaving that company and I thought, if I could create a gift company and serve business development professionals like me, that would be a great stream of income, but it would also leave the world better than I found it. So I started Blossom Box. I got online and I started looking at how do you start a gift company. I was Googling packaging. I was Googling how do you start a website. I built my website, boxes, the marketing, everything that I needed. And I got ready to launch my business as an e-commerce company. Well, launch day came and I had seriously overestimated how many people would buy my boxes. So I learned, I had some great orders, but I learned a lot of lessons the hard way. I learned with e-commerce, there are things that matter, like the shelf life of the saltwater taffies. So even though I found the best taffies in town, I lost a lot of money on them because I didn't know what I didn't know. So Blossom kind of evolved from there. I started getting corporate gift orders. It wasn't something I set out to do. It's kind of something that just happened. But in taking corporate orders for things like the holidays, I realized it would be a better business model for me because I could better estimate my costs going forward. So I wouldn't lose money on those taffies if I knew when the boxes were being shipped out and I had the buyers in place. So Blossom kind of evolved from there, got into corporate gifting, and then I got my first large sales incentive client. So I went from doing orders that were a couple $1,000s to having a single client who was spending a couple $100,000 in a year. So it really evolved and has become something that I love. It's something I'm passionate about. I've always worked full time in the midst of having Blossom Box, which I think is something a lot of business owners do starting out. But something I want to share today is my most embarrassing moment at Blossom Box. So a few months in, I got my first order from a Fortune 500 company. And I was so excited. It was a little over $20,000. And I thought, this is amazing. This is more business than I've done in a couple months. Well, the problem was because this company was the Fortune 500, they had a long accounting process. Some of you might be familiar with that. It was going to take 4 weeks for them to pay me. Well, what I couldn't tell them is I didn't have the money to order the inventory I would have needed in advance to get their order going. So I called my banker and I was so excited. I said, hey, I have an accounts receivable. It's a Fortune 500. They are buying these gift boxes. Isn't it so exciting? Is there any way you could give me a $10,000 unsecured line of credit? And my banker immediately texted back and said, no, we can't. And what they said after that was, we recommend you do Kiva. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with Kiva. It's a great tool for business owners. It's kind of like GoFundMe. You can raise money, pay it back on a 0% interest loan for your business. But the problem with that was Kiva takes typically a month minimum. And I had to have my inventory ordered in 2 weeks. And I just remember being so embarrassed and feeling so small. Who couldn't get a small line of credit at a bank? And it's one of those things I think back on every day as a banker, because now I've learned so much that I didn't know then. But it was discouraging. So how that story ended was my younger sister and I, we just maxed out our credit cards to buy that inventory. I'm from a cash only family. And this was one of my first experiences with scary credit cards. So we ended up getting the inventory, the company paid, and it worked out. But I told myself from that moment going forward that I was going to figure out how to not ever have this happen to me again. So I want to take a moment in the chat. If you have ever had an embarrassing moment in your business, or you've had a difficulty. For me, it was I couldn't cash flow my small business in the beginning. If you guys want to take a second just to share it in the chat, the reason I think this is important was because when I was in my business journey, I felt very alone in it. And maybe it's not business related. Maybe it's something with a mortgage. Maybe you've called the bank and they've said no. whatever it might be, I think it's very encouraging just to share with one another, which kind of transitions me into where I am now. So I have hated banks. I have been the poster child for the bank broke my heart because they turned me down in a moment when I had a dream. But I've learned a lot about that since. I do have a Q&A. Let me see here. Oh, it says chat is disabled. Okay, let me see. Panelists can, okay. Okay, I just enabled the chat, so you guys should be able to share in it now. Let me know if not. Let's see. Okay, it's working now. Great. Okay, well, so my transition into banking was a little bit of a surprise, just because I had my heart broken by a bank. So now that I'm in banking, I've kind of made it my mission to help women never end up in a situation like I was in. It wasn't fun to be embarrassed. I didn't tell anyone about it because who wants to tell someone when your bank tells you no? So kind of transitioning into my role in private bank, I had always thought private bank was for football players. So I had a friend who was in the NFL, and I remember this individual coming to town, and we banked at the same bank, but they would always go in this private door. And I wondered what it was for the longest time. And finally they told me, well, it's private bank. And I had just thought, oh, I probably don't qualify for that. That's probably a multimillionaire type situation to bank, but it's actually not. So what I wish someone had told me was what private bank actually is. So there are branches that you can go into, but most banks have some sort of private bank. You've probably met someone from a bank, especially through being a part of a chamber. There are a ton of great bankers who are involved who can share similar things with you. What I've learned is that private bank, it does have income and liquidity requirements to qualify to be a part of it. But I hit a point in my career, I had qualified for years without knowing it because no one ever told me. Private bank is typically a highly customized, high-touch service for individuals. So it doesn't have to be a business owner. It could just be for you and your family. It's designed for people who are busy or complex, a white glove service, and they have some different products and branches. And so something that I think a lot about, both as a business owner, as a banker, as an employee, is just where am I headed in life and how can a bank impact that? For me, if I had have developed a relationship with a banker in advance of asking for that line of credit with Blossom, I probably could have got it. But I had never paused and asked myself, what are my deepest needs and hopes financially? And how does a bank relate to that? I had never thought through, hey, if I'm going to start a business where I'm selling a product, I might need a line of credit. I hadn't really thought through at this point in life, am I going to want to buy a home? And do I want to take a line of credit out on that home to give towards a business need or to help with something else? And so I hope the next few slides will help you all just in some questions to determine when you're building a bank relationship. So determine your needs before talking to a banker. So step one, this applies to everyone. I talk to my personal friends about this, my coworkers, my colleagues, business owners that I meet in the community. I even talk with a lot of college students about this. So determining your needs. I just do an audit of myself where I've asked myself these questions. As an individual or as a business, do you plan to do a lot of international traveling? Do you want to exchange money overseas? Maybe you're interested in real estate. Are you going to have one property or could it turn into a portfolio of properties? How is your credit? Is a credit union, a community bank, or a publicly owned bank a better fit for you? Do you plan on ever buying or starting a small business? Do you have a business with high needs? Have you ever had a banker tell you no? Do you care a lot about your kids and You want to open savings and checkings accounts for them that you're on. Whatever your needs are, determining those in advance. And then the next step I learned was just towards developing a banking relationship before you need one, is what is a bank relationship? I used to think before I worked at a bank as a business owner, I thought a bank relationship is just someone I know who believes in me. But the problem with that is it's a lot more than that. So when a bank says, well, what's our banking relationship with the client? They're looking at things like, does this individual have a checking and a savings account with us? Do they have their direct deposit set up with us? Do we have their lending? Do they have their mortgage with us and their auto loans, their home equity line of credit, whatever it may be? Are there investment services with us if we offer those? So really that's what the relationship is. It goes far beyond just someone I know and talk to. These are things that you can be talking with your banker about to better develop a relationship. And something I learned the hard way is that the numbers have to make sense, but your banker also has to write a narrative. So when I was originally turned down in my business, I thought it was just about the narrative. I thought it was just about someone believes in me, they're going to give me this loan, I'm going to get this order taken care of. But it was a lot more than that. The numbers had to make sense. And I didn't know that I was asking for an unsecured line of credit, which is one of the more difficult things to get with the bank, just because the bank doesn't have any collateral in case of default. And then step 3, interviewing bankers. So some questions that I have learned to ask are just, will you keep my loans as part of your in-house portfolio, or will you sell it on the third-party market? Can you do my business and personal banking? Or are those handled separately within the bank? Who am I going to be talking on a daily basis? When I send my friend over to you, who's going to do their loan? What type of team do you have? Who am I going to talk to each day? Do I qualify for private bank? I kind of challenge everyone just to call your banker and say, hey, do I qualify? If there are some great benefits you can get through it, then awesome. And if they say, hey, not quite yet, then you can set a goal of what you want to work towards if it's important to you. And it may not be. Questions like, if you do my mortgage, will you also do my home equity line of credit? What would it take to get an unsecured line of credit with you? Those are questions I wish I'd asked. What type of lending does your bank have an appetite for? What type do you not? There are going to be certain banks who they love farm loans or ranch loans. There are going to be certain banks that bank cannabis businesses and others that do not. One of the biggest tools that I have for myself and that I've learned banks have for me is a global cash flow. So this might seem a little nerdy. I look at my personal global cash flow on a weekly basis, and I set a lot of quarterly goals around it. A global cash flow is just a tool that your bank is looking at, where they're looking at your income that's coming in, they're looking at expenses going out. Expenses going out are things like taxes. And then what we're really looking for as a bank, which these are kind of standard numbers that I've used to make it not specific, but just so you all know, in terms of finances, banks are going to estimate living expenses typically at least 25% of your annual household income. We care about things like a debt to income ratio. If you haven't ever heard what a debt to income ratio is, that's what a lot of lenders, mortgage lenders, a lot of times are talking about when they're saying, hey, we have to look at how much debt they have versus how much income they have going in, because there are federal government regulations that say debt to income has to be within a certain ratio for a bank to do a loan that's ethical and good and makes sense for a client. The other big thing that is trending a lot on social media right now is the DSCR ratio, which is known as the debt service coverage ratio. So that's when you hear people say, hey, you can buy this property and your income might not cover it, but if the income that comes in off the property will cover it, then it will cover, the debt service coverage ratio increases. So banks, a lot of times, I looked up some industry standards on this, debt to income, 40% or less. Debt service coverage ratio, 1.25 times or greater. every bank's going to vary a little bit. A lot of times I will Google free tools online, just to look up your debt to income. You can quickly put it in, but it's a good way to do a financial health check for yourself. So the types of loans I get the most calls about, and also that I've made the most calls on, are listed here. Part of why I'm sharing this is just to share what's out there. Until I came to Private Bank, I didn't know that you could get an accounts receivable line of credit for your business. I didn't know what a stock secured line of credit is. Both of those things, just to give you an example of the creativity you can have, is with an accounts receivable line of credit for me, it would have looked like if I had invoices in advance for holiday gifting. That's a big, busy season in my business when I know I'm going to have to buy a lot of items to fulfill those gift orders. And banks will have different policies where they might say, hey, on your inventory, we'll lend you 60% of your accounts receivable or 80% of your accounts receivable, whatever it may be. Something that's really unique that I have learned about since being at Private Bank, and this is really in some of our large city markets like Houston, art secured lines of credit exist. So maybe you have a piece of art or a family valuable, something creative that you could be leveraging cash flow wise. So that sums up my presentation for today. Does anyone have questions? Okay, so one question I see is, how do you know which type of bank is best for your needs? I think it really depends. Once you write down your list and you do just an honest look at yourself and say, hey, how is my credit? What do I want? And then based off those things, I would reach out to the chamber honestly and say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. What bankers do you know might be able to help? I think the chamber's the first good resource. A second good resource is I also will Google. Typically, I'll just Google bank in Muskogee that does mortgages. So I think that, I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you, Nicole, and a big thank you to our sponsors once again. Please be sure to join us tomorrow here on Zoom at 10 a.m. for Naomi Kitt, a senior reporter with KJRH Channel 2. We hope to see everyone tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m. at Queen City and Company for a Common Grounds presented by Premier USA to chat with other attendees, grab a coffee, and expand your network. Be sure to follow the Women's Leadership Facebook page to see daily recognitions of local women, information on this week's networking events and giveaways. For a full rundown of the week's events, visit MuskogeeChamber.org. It's prize time. Today's giveaway is a $50 gift card from Factory Connections, located at 2246 East Shawnee Road. Time to spin the wheel.
Okay, hold on. Okay.
Derek Jones is today's winner. Congratulations. Thank you. And we'll see everyone tomorrow.